Japan's government has taken a major step. A supplementary budget for fiscal 2025, covering April 2025 through March 2026, was approved that brings total defense spending to roughly 2% of gross domestic product, accomplishing the government's target 2 years ahead of schedule. According to official figures, the additional defense allocation amounts to 1.1 trillion yen, about US $7.04 billion, which, when added to the regular defense budget, brings the total to about 11 trillion yen for the year. The decision reflects a dramatic shift in Tokyo's security posture under the leadership of Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, who took office on 21 October 2025. Less than a month after assuming the premiership, she pledged in her first policy speech before Parliament that Japan would accelerate the goal of raising defense expenditures to 2% of GDP, achieving it in the current fiscal year rather than the originally planned 2027 date. Japan must take the initiative in fundamentally strengthening its defense capabilities, she declared. Observers inside and outside Japan note that the broader plan goes beyond just boosting budget numbers. Under Takaichi's leadership, Tokyo is preparing a comprehensive overhaul of its security and defense doctrines. The government plans to relax long-standing restrictions on arms exports, revise key security documents, and potentially develop more counter-strike capabilities, rather than limiting itself to traditional self-defense. Within Japan, the shift has triggered debate over both its strategic wisdom and its domestic costs. Some commentators warn that acquiring what the government calls enemy base attack capability undermines Japan's post-war commitment to an exclusively defense-oriented policy. One domestic editorial highlighted that this could mark a fundamental transformation of Japan's pacifist identity. Economic voices raise alarm too. Given Japan's already heavy public debt and the pressures of rising inflation and living costs, allocating over 10 trillion yen to defense is seen by critics as a burden on households and public finances, at a time when social welfare and cost of living relief remain pressing. Public opinion appears divided. According to a recent poll, while a significant portion of the Japanese population supports the idea of collective self-defense if China were to attack Taiwan, and a majority backs raising defense spending to 2% of GDP, a substantial minority remains opposed. At the same time, the timing and direction of Tokyo's moves have triggered sharp reactions from Beijing. On 24 November, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning issued a strong statement condemning what Beijing called Takaichi's erroneous remarks on Taiwan and warned that Japan's recent actions have seriously violated critically important agreements between the two nations, undermining the political foundation of bilateral relations. China's concerns extend beyond rhetoric. Chinese officials argue that Tokyo's shift may signal a reversal of the post-war order and a return to militarism, an alarming possibility given the region's recent history. At the heart of the dispute lies the sensitive and highly contested issue of Taiwan. In November 2025, during parliamentary debate, Takaichi suggested that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could constitute an existential crisis for Japan, a view that sharply departs from Japan's traditional policy of strategic ambiguity. After Beijing protested via a letter to the United Nations accusing Tokyo of threatening military intervention, Tokyo responded firmly. The Japanese UN ambassador dismissed the accusations as unsubstantiated and reaffirmed that Japan's policy remains one of passive defense. Still, Chinese officials remain unconvinced. Mao Ning questioned Tokyo's commitment to existing agreements, arguing that if Japan cannot unequivocally reiterate its adherence to the One China principle, then maintaining that position amounts to empty words. She urged Japan to do serious soul-searching and correct its wrongdoing, calling Japan's trajectory a misguided dollar. Of course, Tokyo, however, shows little indication of backing down. Alongside the defense spending increase, the government is expected to revise its security doctrines, a move long resisted under Japan's post-war constitution, which emphasizes defensive posture and renounces war as a sovereign right. In Tokyo and among analysts abroad, Many interpret these developments as part of a broader strategic recalibration. The region surrounding Japan, especially the Indo-Pacific, has become increasingly volatile, with intensifying military activity by multiple regional powers. Japan's leadership argues that the new budget and doctrinal shift are necessary to respond to what it describes as the most severe and complex security environment since the end of World War II. But not everyone agrees with this framing. Critics warn that Japan risks provoking a spiral of militarization across East Asia, possibly undoing decades of relative stability and potentially triggering an arms race with major powers. Others worry that the economic burden will further strain ordinary citizens, especially at a time when wages and living standards are under pressure. As diplomatic tensions escalate, the response from Beijing has gone beyond words. Reports indicate China may consider deploying Coast Guard vessels near strategically sensitive areas, a move aimed at signaling its displeasure and readiness to defend what it regards as its territorial integrity. Japan's domestic political trajectory is also evolving. Takaichi's administration, backed by a new coalition, appears committed not only to large-scale defense spending, but also to structural reform, relaxing arms export restrictions, revising formal security documents, and potentially reinterpreting or rewriting constitutional limits on Japan's military role. In the coming months, many eyes will be on Tokyo. Will Japan proceed with creating truly offensive capabilities, long taboo in Japanese politics, or will domestic and international pressure force a retrenchment? At the same time, Beijing's reaction, both diplomatic and strategic, will reveal how far China is willing to escalate. So far, officials have warned that any attempt by Japan to revive militarism would be met with serious consequences, potentially reshaping regional security dynamics. The stakes are high. What Japan does now may mark a turning point, not only for its own national security doctrine, but also for the entire balance of power across East Asia. The world will be watching. Yet, despite the mounting diplomacy and political warnings, neither Beijing nor Tokyo appears willing to soften their positions. In China's strategic circles, Japan's accelerated defense expansion is increasingly interpreted as part of a broader regional alignment with the United States, one that Beijing believes aims to contain its rise. Chinese analysts argue that the renewed Japanese focus on long-range missiles, early warning systems, and counterstrike options shifts the regional military balance in ways that Beijing cannot ignore. At the same time, Japan's leadership insists that these measures are responses to a rapidly changing security landscape, citing concerns about China's military modernization, its activities around the Senkaku, Diaoyu Islands, and the persistent pressure surrounding Taiwan. Both sides frame their actions as defensive, yet each perceives the other's moves as overtly provocative, locking the region into a cycle of mutual distrust. As tensions escalate, international partners are attempting to gauge how far this confrontation might go. Regional governments in Seoul, Manila, Canberra, and Taipei are closely watching the diplomatic exchanges, mindful that any miscalculation between Asia's second and third largest economies could ripple across the entire Indo-Pacific. The United States, for its part, has signaled strong support for Japan's defense reforms, viewing Tokyo as a critical component of its strategic posture in the region. But Washington also recognizes the volatility of this moment and the possibility that rising nationalist sentiment on both sides could fuel unintended escalation. For now, the balance remains precarious. Japan is rearming faster than at any time in its post-war history. China is warning more sharply than ever before, and the geopolitical fault lines of East Asia are shifting in ways that will shape the region for years to come.